everyone, a very warm welcome to a brand new episode of World Panorama, the only show that gives you news from across the globe in the most concise, direct and unbiased reports. I'm Sana Khan. Before we get you detailed reports, here's a look at the top stories this week. SCO summit in Beijing shines a spotlight on Afghanistan, shifts its focus to economy from politics. US steps up pressure on Pakistan. US Defense Secretary says US patience with Pakistan is reaching limits. Even as US-Russia face off on Iran's nuclear program, Iran criticizes the IAEA but hopes to conclude the nuclear deal soon. And Sachin Tendulkar becomes the first active sportsperson of the country to be nominated as member of the upper house of Parliament. Well, this week we focus on the recent developments in China's Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or the SCO summit. The 12th Shanghai Cooperation Organization Leadership Summit held in Beijing on the 6th to 7th of June brought together the Council of Heads of States of the SCO members to discuss various issues of mutual strategic interest. The Beijing summit not only provided a fresh occasion for the Chinese leadership to review their country's prominence within the SCO after a decade of its existence, but also to analyze as to what extent Beijing can keep its leadership position intact. The Chinese foreign minister, in fact, recently said that the SCO remains a priority in Chinese foreign policy. Though both China and Russia are leading figures of the SCO, it is the Chinese supremacy that has been SCO's main highlight. So what were the key takeaways of the summit? To discuss this and more, I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Baladas Ghosal, visiting senior fellow of the Center for Policy Research. Thanks, sir, so much for joining me here on World Panorama. Before that, here's a look at the special report.
Leaders of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization signed an agreement on June 7 to strengthen the group's role in international dialogue at the end of a two-day annual summit in Beijing.
We support improving the construction of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and positively expanding dialogue outwards and increasing cooperation with observer countries, dialogue with partner countries, the United Nations and other organizations. We agree to accept Afghanistan as an SCO observer country.
With the United States and NATO set to leave Afghanistan over the next 2 years, power in the region is shifting. The summit is being seen as Russia and China's attempt to capitalize on the decline of American influence in Pakistan and Afghanistan.
China being the second largest economy in the world and a rapidly advancing country in the world, and luckily, very, very luckily, being a neighbor of Afghanistan, is high on our agenda in relationships, and in that sense, Afghanistan will be expanding and strengthening relations with China and concerting China in all other aspects.
Meanwhile, India on the concluding day pitched for a larger and more constructive role in the six-nation SCO as a full member and underlined that the group is a promising alternative regional platform to help stabilize Afghanistan.
India would be happy to play a larger, wider and more constructive role in the SCO as a full member, as and when the organization finalizes the expansion modalities.
Russia, the other most prominent partner of SCO, aims at furthering the strategic cooperation partnership with China. The state visit to China is Putin's first visit abroad after returning to the Kremlin, which illustrates the importance Russia attaches to its relations with China and attracts the attention of the people at home. On Syria, the leaders called for dialogue to address the violence there. The SCO issued a statement dismissing any use of force against Iran as unacceptable, saying that such a measure would threaten regional and global stability and security.
The Iranian nuclear issue should be resolved within the framework of talks between the six parties through peaceful dialogue. We are firmly against using military or other means to resolve the Iranian nuclear issue.
The Beijing summit is another occasion to review, assess and gauge once again the importance of the SCO in Chinese foreign policy. But no matter how much success Beijing achieved at the summit, one thing's certain, that China is seriously reviewing the current and future prospects of the SCO in its foreign policy strategy.
Let me go across to Dr. Ghosal with that. Dr. Ghosal, you saw a plethora of issues taken up in the SCO summit in Beijing. China offering a loan of $10 billion to SCO members. What are the main takeaways, if you could briefly tell us, of the summit itself?
See, China wants to put its footprint on Asia particularly.
Right.
You remember just after the Second World War, like the United States wanted to emerge as the real power and promised Marshall Plan for the rehabilitation of Europe. I think China is also trying to create an alternative paradigm.
Okay.
What is known sometimes as Beijing consensus as opposed to Washington consensus. And as you know, Beijing also plays its foreign policy card with its checkbook diplomacy.
Okay.
It has enormous amount of foreign reserves, and it also wants to influence the foreign policies of some of the countries with its checkbook. And many of these countries need assistance, sometimes aid, in terms of their own development programs. And Chinese help comes as a ready kind of offer to some of these countries.
Right.
And sometimes Chinese aid comes with less strings than the Western aid. So it is nothing unusual that China has decided to provide that amount of money
Right.
in order to make its presence felt in these countries, and also to influence their foreign policies
Right.
vis-a-vis China.
But Dr. Ghosal, in this summit, do you think China has stepped up, the momentum? It has picked up a momentum in a sense in this summit as to give out a clear-cut message to the West. Do you think that has happened?
I think it is emerging, and I think it is happening under certain circumstances. If you remember the international position of China in the last 2 years and the kind of controversy that has erupted in the last 2 years, particularly in the South China Sea,
Right.
and the kind of reactions that it had evoked in some of the neighboring countries, and the kind of lobbying that they did with the United States to come back to the region,
Right.
that gave the Chinese a message that they have to really use their diplomacy to change the position. And Chinese are very flexible in terms of their foreign policy. You know, they can always wax and wane whenever they need. And they found that the position for some time was in favor of a low posture policy. And
Okay.
if you see, in the last couple of months, China was actually lying low, and it had not also been as aggressive
Right,
as
as
it
it
was in
is now.
2010
Yeah.
on the question of South China Sea. Now I think the Americans getting some kind of encouragement from the neighbors, they are now trying to reorient their foreign policy and
Right.
their strategy towards Asia Pacific. And that has, I think, sent a alarm bell to China, and they thought that they must act now. And I think that is how they're trying to now put forward the SCO as
Right.
one of the regional organizations to really look after the interests of the regional countries.
Right. Now taking on from here, especially on the troop withdrawal from Afghanistan, China obviously has made it clear that it wants to, along with Russia, it wants to play a larger role, as the troops withdraw. As far as Afghanistan is concerned, you have India looking for a larger role in the SCO, which hasn't really happened as of now. You have Afghanistan being admitted as an observer. So a couple of important developments there as far as Afghanistan is concerned.
In Afghanistan, people are really not sure what is going to happen after 2014, once the Americans withdraw from there.
Right.
And I think China is positioning itself. Already China has some positions on Afghanistan because it has investments, and obviously it can also provide a lot of capital for the rehabilitation of Afghanistan.
Right.
And it has also certain other concerns about terrorism. As you know, it borders an interesting area called Xinjiang, where a
Right.
Muslim insurgency is going on. And I think China wants to keep these countries in good humor so that it can also control the Muslim insurgency in Xinjiang province. And China wants that it would like to play an important role after the
Right.
Americans withdraw.
Okay. How do you see the role of the SCO in the days to come?
It is going to play an important role, but what would be the shape of that role is yet not very clear, because so many things can happen. Now with the kind of American posture in Asia Pacific, I don't think Americans are going to fully withdraw from Afghanistan in 2014. They will withdraw, but I think they will keep certain amount of presence there. But China is now looking for an opportunity how to utilize that American position and to offset American position in Asia Pacific region.
On that note, Dr. Ghosal, thanks so much for joining me on World Panorama. So clearly, China is all prepared to set a footprint as far as Asia is concerned. We'll have to see what kind of a role does the SCO assume in the days to come. We'll have to wrap up this discussion now. Thanks once again, Dr. Ghosal, for joining me. We slip into a very short break. Spain in Eurozone crisis crosshairs. Wait up for a detailed report after this very short break. Thanks for staying with us. New talks between the United Nations nuclear watchdog and Iran began on Friday, with the IAEA expected to push Tehran to allow its monitors access to a military base near the capital. Here's more.
New talks with Iran failed to result in a deal allowing greater access to its contested nuclear program. The UN nuclear watchdog IAEA called the outcome disappointing.
We presented a reverse draft which addressed Iran's earlier stated concerns. However, there has been no progress, and indeed, Iran raised issues that we have already discussed and added new ones. This is disappointing. A date for a follow-on meeting has yet to be fixed.
The meeting's failure a few weeks after the UN nuclear chief said he had won assurances by Tehran that an agreement would be struck made them prospects for success in broader negotiations between Iran and major powers later this month.
I just want to conclude that everything is right track. We are continuing our work, and we are sure that the things will be in a best possible way. The more we spend time now, it is better for the implementation.
The IAEA has been seeking a deal with Iran that would allow greater access to sites, people, and documents tied to Tehran's nuclear program. This includes access to the Partian military base near Tehran, where the IAEA believes suspicious explosives testing was carried out before 2003 and possibly after that.
Spain has no immediate plans to request a European bailout of its banks and is awaiting the results of an independent banking audit due later this month before any further steps are taken. There are also reports that Spain, Germany, and European Union policymakers are in intense discussions over how to help Madrid recapitalize its troubled banks after a series of reforms failed to convince on the stability of the country's financial system. Here's a report.
Spain's ailing banks have been at the center of Eurozone concerns for several weeks. Madrid has all along insisted it could cope alone, but now it says the banking crisis has pushed its borrowing costs to prohibitively high levels. The country is asking its European neighbors to help in recapitalizing its banks.
Spain does not necessarily want to take advantage of the euro rescue mechanism because it would mean that Spain's rating would be further downgraded.
Despite the concerns about Spain's escalating crisis, European shares rose slightly on Wednesday morning. Banking stocks also gained on investors' hopes the European Central Bank might provide lenders with more cheap loans. Even as fears persist that lack of action could threaten the whole bloc, France's finance minister said the Eurozone has the instruments to help Spain if needed.
If the Spanish government wishes at any point, we have instruments of solidarity in the Eurozone which can be mobilized very quickly. We have no doubt about the Spanish government's capability and will do what is needed.
With Greece, Ireland and Portugal all under international bailout programs, financial markets have grown increasingly anxious about the risk that Spain, mired in a deepening banking crisis, could be forced to do likewise.
The Spanish authorities have already indicated, at least in the context of one particular bank, Bankia, that there will be a recapitalization. They've earmarked money to be had for that. They're going to have to put in place the system to actually finance the recapitalization.
3 different assessments of Spanish banks are due in the coming days and months. The IMF report will include how much capital the financial system needs to weather a severe economic downturn.
And keeping up pressure on Pakistan, US Defense Secretary Leon Panetta landed in Afghanistan Thursday morning to confer with military leaders on plans to withdraw troops and deal with rising violence in the continuing war with the Taliban. Earlier, Panetta flew to India on a 2-day visit as part of his week-long Asia tour to explain a new US military strategy to allies and partners in the region. This strategy calls for a shift in US focus to the Asia-Pacific region. Here's more. US Defense Secretary Leon Panetta arrived in New Delhi on 5th of June on a 2-day visit to deepen defense ties with India, which was listed in the strategic guidance in January as a country with which the US wants to have a defense partnership. Panetta described the US relationship with Pakistan as complicated but necessary as the United States and NATO continue to withdraw forces from Afghanistan.
It is, as I said, a complicated relationship, but it is a necessary relationship. They are important to the stability of this region. And for that reason, both the United States and India and others are going to have to do everything we can to try to do what is possible to improve the relationship.
Panetta said the US was fighting a war against Al-Qaeda in Pakistan's lawless northwestern territories and suggested that drone strikes targeting Al-Qaeda leaders in the region would continue.
So, our security interests are involved here with regards to Pakistan, both in terms of the fight against Al-Qaeda, but also the fight against those who continue to threaten our forces in Afghanistan.
During their meeting, Panetta and Defense Minister A.K. Antony are also believed to have discussed China's growing military budget and its belligerent behavior in the South China Sea. On Thursday, Panetta arrived in Afghanistan to take stock of progress in the war and discuss plans for the troop drawdown, even as violence spiked in the south. Time for a very short break on World's Panorama. After that, we take a look at the latest in Syria and US's call for Assad to step down. Thanks for staying with us. Let's now take a quick look at some of the other international developments in a quick wrap.
US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton on Thursday condemned the Syrian government for new reports of simply unconscionable violence, accusing President Bashar Assad of intensifying a crackdown of a national uprising that has already killed thousands. The reactions came as activists said pro-government militia men and security forces killed at least 78 people, including children, in Syria's central province of Hama on Wednesday. Hosni Mubarak's health sharply deteriorated on Wednesday, days after he was sentenced to life in prison. Specialists were evaluating whether to transfer him to a better-equipped hospital outside the penal system. The deposed leader's health scare added to the uncertainty engulfing Egypt. people around the world turned their attention to the daytime sky on Tuesday and early Wednesday in Asia to make sure they caught the rare sight of the transit of Venus. The transit saw Venus crossing the face of the Sun. The view was visible across different parts of the world, including South Asia, the Middle East, East Africa, and most of Europe.
Time now to gear up for our next report. Here's all the news from the world of sports.
Indian cricketing legend Sachin Tendulkar took oath as a member of the upper house of country's parliament on Monday. After taking the oath, he said he was privileged to be nominated and that he had always wanted to give something back to cricket post his playing days. He said his aim was also to work for the welfare of other sports apart from cricket in the country. Tiger Woods spectacularly overhauled a fading Spencer Levin and a charging Rory Sabatini with a few moments of magic to win the Memorial Tournament on Sunday. Woods birdied 3 of the last 4 holes for a 5-under par 67 and a 9-under total of 279, tying Nicklaus in the all-time standings for career victories on the US circuit. Novak Djokovic and Petra Kvitova received the Sports World Champion honours in Paris on Tuesday after their standout 2011 seasons. Djokovic began 2011 by claiming the Australian Open in Melbourne. He then won his next 6 tournaments in succession. Kvitova was recognised for her breakthrough season when she picked up her first Grand Slam victory at Wimbledon. The Czech won a total of 6 titles in 2011, including the year-end WTA Championship. A psychic pig was lined up to take over where Paul the Octopus left off at the 2010 World Cup by predicting the results of matches at the European Championship in Ukraine and Poland. A big hog named Kyriak was presented on Tuesday to soccer fans in the main fan zone of the Ukrainian capital, where the final match is due to take place next month.
1,000 flotillas, gala lunches, star-studded dinners, a packed musical concert and a perfect appearance of the Queen in the balcony of the Buckingham Palace alongside her family. This is how the Queen marked her 60 years of reign over Britain. The mood was absolutely magnificent all over London as the celebrations went on. World Panorama gets you a recap of the spectacular 4 days of party that gripped not just the Britons but the world. You enjoy these visuals. I sign off on that note. See you all next week with more world news. Until then, goodbye.
The curtains fell Tuesday on a 4-day extravaganza marking Queen Elizabeth II's 60 years on the throne. The celebrations culminated with deafening applause from hundreds of thousands gathered outside Buckingham Palace to get a glimpse of the monarch on her balcony.
The events that I have attended to mark my Diamond Jubilee have been a humbling experience. It has touched me deeply to see so many thousands of families, neighbours and friends celebrating together in such a happy atmosphere. I hope that memories of all this year's happy events will brighten our lives for many years to come. I will continue to treasure and draw inspiration from the countless kindnesses shown to me in this country and throughout the Commonwealth. Thank you all.
Earlier on Tuesday, Queen Elizabeth arrived at St. Paul's Cathedral to a special service marking her Diamond Jubilee. More than 2,000 guests attended the event. In a videotaped message posted on the White House website, US President Barack Obama offered heartfelt congratulations to the Queen, the British people and the members of the Commonwealth for 60 years on the throne.
In honor of your 60 extraordinary years on the throne, communities across the Commonwealth have lit thousands of Jubilee beacons. And may the light of your Majesty's crown continue to reign supreme for many years to come.
The Jubilee celebrations on Monday saw some of the biggest names in the music business perform at a 3-hour concert in front of Buckingham Palace. The Queen met Paul McCartney, Elton John and Stevie Wonder, who topped the bill at the star-studded concert celebrating the Diamond Jubilee. And this is how it all began, when Queen Elizabeth joined a spectacular armada of 1,000 vessels on June 3rd for the most dazzling display of British pageantry seen on London's River Thames in 350 years. The long weekend dedicated to the Diamond Jubilee has been seen as a success story for the monarchy, their media team and the Queen personally. Polls suggest the Crown and the Queen herself are more popular than they have been for decades. With one suggesting the hereditary monarch was more in touch with her people than Cameron and his ministers.
Congratulations and thank you for everything you've done for us, Your Majesty. We love you lots.
And we hope Philip gets well soon. God bless you, Queen.
Congratulations on 60 years. Woo.